Hello and welcome to Series 3 of Crisis What Crisis, a podcast designed to be a useful field guide as we all try to navigate and continue to come to terms with a dramatically changed world. Whether personal, professional or both, crisis is without doubt the new shared experience. I'm Andy Coulson, a former newspaper editor, Downing Street Director of Communications and one-time inmate of HMP Belmarsh. For the last 5 years, I've put all of my experience, the good and the bad, to use as a strategic advisor to business leaders. And I can tell you the bad has been just as useful as the good. And that got me thinking as the first lockdown began that there are plenty of great podcasts out there where you can hear stories of success, but there are far fewer where you can benefit from the experience of those whose lives have properly unraveled. So in Crisis What Crisis, I talk to the embattled, shamed, courageous, ruined, damaged, resilient, unlucky and lucky survivors of crisis. Some names will be familiar, some less so. Our guests share their experiences, though, with honesty, often with humour, but always in the hope that they might be useful to anyone facing down their own demons and challenges. Put simply, these are crisis conversations worth sharing. Stay tuned at the end of the episode when I'll give my thoughts and takeaways, the lessons, if you like, for when life unravels. And if you enjoy the podcast, please do subscribe and give us a rating and a review. It really helps make sure these stories reach an even wider audience of people who may find them useful. And that, in the end, is what it's all about. Crisis What Crisis is generously supported by Mindstream, a brilliant company who harness the power of music for personal well-being, whether it be music for meditation, to help focus, sleep, stress relief, yoga and fitness, rejuvenation, even grief and loss. Mindstream is there to improve human performance. I've tried it, it works, and I'd recommend having a listen to the Mindstream catalogue yourself. Just search Mindstream, that's mind with a Y, on Spotify. Thanks again for joining me. My guest today is the world-renowned chef Hemant Oberoi, a man who has cooked for world leaders, Bollywood and Hollywood stars. Hemant is credited by the Hindu Times as a true innovator and the most powerful chef India has ever seen. But he's also a man who, when crisis came, when horror in fact came, proved himself to be capable of the most astonishing resilience and selfless heroism. Those of you who've seen the movie Hotel Mumbai will remember the role dramatized by the well-known Indian actor Anupam Kher, who played Hemant. The dramatic scenes that feature him reveal only some of the bravery he and his staff displayed when Islamic terrorists wreaked havoc across Mumbai over 3 days in November 2008, killing 165 people and wounding 300 more. Hemant was working inside the famous Taj Mumbai Hotel as head chef on the night of the attacks. He chose to stay behind and hide the surviving guests from the 4 terrorists who had taken control of the building, setting it on fire and machine gunning so many other guests at random. He was joined by his dedicated staff, 7 of whom were killed as they formed a human shield to allow guests to escape. It is only luck that prevented Hemant from being the 8th. Why did he stay behind when he had countless opportunities to run to safety? Hemant, who now runs his own restaurants in Mumbai, Abu Dhabi and California, says, "Because the guest is God, it was our duty to look after them." Hemant Oberoi, welcome to Crisis What Crisis. How are you, sir?
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me for this talk. And sometimes it brings back the memories.
Of course. And all I can say, Hemant, is it's a privilege to have you here, and thank you so much for giving us the time. I know you've continued to work hard throughout the pandemic. How has it affected business across your restaurants? Can I ask? Are you concerned about the sort of long-term impact on the industry that you love so much?
Customers are still little hesitant to come out, let me tell you, because they are not sure about when the vaccine is going to come. I'm not even sure what vaccine is going to make a difference too much in the beginning or whatever, but they are still not sure to come out.
As we touched on, you have your own restaurant empire now, but of course you worked for the Taj Group, Hemant, for more than 40 years. In many ways, having spent so many years working for Taj, was that kind of your home? I mean, do you still feel that way in terms of the kind of years that you spent working for the group?
And 74, I was just about 19 and a half years old when I joined them. And 1985-86, I took over as executive chef of that hotel.
Right.
Still being a young boy, and I took over that hotel, and then gradually I became the corporate chef for all the luxury hotels all over the world. And I treated that hotel, and still I do that as my own.
Yes. The emotional attachment is very deep for you.
When you work, I mean, more than my marriage, it has been there.
I hope your wife isn't going to listen to this podcast, Hemant.
So it is marriage has been about 40 years, and this is about 42 years of association with them.
Yeah.
And it was a long association. I mean, there was not a single day if I was in Mumbai, I was not in the hotel.
Yes.
That is kind of an attachment we had to the place, and I treated that as my own, and that's what God was kind, and my senior management and the owners were kind, and they had given me a lot of freedom to do whatever I wanted to.
There was a brilliant British TV documentary made by Lynn Alloway, which told the story of the Taj Mumbai. Not just the attacks. There was an episode that looked at the attacks, but it actually looked at the incredibly rich history of the hotel. A beautiful hotel that carried so much significance for the staff, as you just explained, but also for the city itself. I mean, it was and is an incredibly important building, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It's a beautiful city. It's a city which never sleeps. That's the kind of a city it is. It is like, in some ways, better than New York. And people dine out. People go. Freedom is there. You can see people sitting at 3 a.m., 4 a.m. On Chapati Beach and on Marine Drive, which is a sea-facing area, and young couples are sitting throughout the night. I mean, nobody disturbs, police just walks in, and they want them to be safe. That's it. And nobody interferes in each other's life. So that's the kind of a city, and which has got a millionaires in that city. So that makes the city so beautiful. And the spirit of the city is so beautiful that, it comes back. It bounces back in no time. Whether it was the 93 blast or whether it was the other riots which took place. I mean, everything within few days, this city bounced back. And that's why when this attack happened and our place was destroyed, I'm sorry, I still say our place was destroyed. And it felt, our house has been destroyed, and how we have to get back on our feet so soon.
Yes.
And I think the entire team, the entire management supported each other, and we bounced back in probably 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And on Christmas Eve, we were open.
No, and open and full. I understand. I want to ask you about that a little bit later. Your personal relationship with the guests, and I'm asking this because clearly, as we get into the story of what unfolded, I think it's fair to say that that's what is at maybe you'll disagree, but that was perhaps at the heart of so many of the decisions you took. That the connection with the guests ran so deeply for you over such a long period of time that the decisions that you made were natural in a sense. Is that fair?
Yes. If you go and see, I have seen the generations in the decades, in the last few decades. I have seen the parents of these guests. I have seen the guests by themselves, and I have seen their kids being born and growing in front of me. So I have literally seen 3 generations in that.
If we may, Hemant, I'd like to go back to the 26th of November 2008. A normal, although I think very busy, pretty hectic night at the Taj. You're in the kitchen when at around, as I understand, 9:15 there or thereabouts p.m. the first signs that the attack has begin to kind of filter through. You're told that there's been a shooting, and at first you assume that it's a movie shooting, that it's a film that's being made outside the hotel. Is that your sort of first memory of what happened that night?
Yes, you're correct about that. Because one of my chefs called me up. He says, "Sir, there's a shooting going on." And I told him back, I said, every week or 10 days you call me up for the same thing. And I presumed that was a film shooting. He says, "No, sir, it's not that kind of a shooting. The shots are being fired and the gentleman is lying dead outside our kitchen door, which is the passage in the corridor." And then I heard one more shot, and my immediate reaction to him was, just lock the door, switch off the lights. And he ran from the front side, from the behind the kitchen, and he switched off the restaurant lights, because there are 2 restaurants attached to that kitchen. And they immediately switched off the lights and they locked the front door. And when the terrorists were passing through that corridor, they peeped into that and they didn't see anybody moving or anybody. They thought this place was locked and there was nothing. So they went ahead. So there were about 30 to 40 diners sitting inside.
Let me stop you there, Hemant, if I may. It's important, I think, that we explain, for people listening to this, that what had happened in the preceding hour or so is that 10 young men, Islamic terrorists from Pakistan, had arrived in Mumbai in an inflatable speedboat, and they'd dispersed across the city and began to randomly shoot people at the train station, at a local cafe, and at a number of other sites. Some of the terrorists then made their way to the hotel, to the Taj, which was their next target, their planned target. And looking like backpackers, they'd entered the lobby, and then they began to shoot guests at random. And that shooting is the point at which you are called by a waiter from one of your restaurants, and he explains that someone has been shot directly outside. And you give the advice to turn off the lights and stay quiet, get under the tables. Now, on one level, Hemant, it seems like an obvious piece of advice, but I think many people would have frozen in such an unreal situation. Looking back, why is it that you were, how is it, not why, how is it that you were able to think so clearly, so quickly?
I think the situation was that how to control the situation at that moment. Whatever spontaneous decision was coming to my mind, I took it. One after the other, when the second, right in front of that restaurant as our Indian restaurant, the same instructions we gave it to those gentlemen, and they shut the door. So that was on the ground floor, and the ground floor was secured. On the first floor was different story. And then we heard that they are climbing up to the first floor where the wedding was on, one of the weddings in the banquet room. And that we had to take a different decision, because we had to lock all the front doors, because there are 8 doors to that banquet room.
Mm-hmm.
And luckily that night, the gentleman had said, just open the corner door for me, and the main central door, please keep it shut and keep a bar over there. We were lucky enough in that case also. But rest of the doors, the guys immediately closed them when they heard that the terrorists are outside the banquet room. So that was the spur of the decision. And Still, I think our team did not panic. I told them there's no need to panic because we have secured the entry.
Had you ever, as a team, prior to this, undergone any kind of scenario training? Had anyone at the police or anyone given you any advice should something like this ever happen? Obviously, perhaps not something quite as terrible as what unfolded. But did you ever have any training in advance?
No, never.
This is all instinct.
It's all inbuilt. I grew up in a place. In my childhood, I was born in a place in Punjab, and my school was just 2 kilometers away from the border. In 1965, on 4th September, early in the morning, the bombs were falling, and my dad told me, I think the war has erupted. And I'm going out to fetch something, and he came running behind me. He pushed me to the floor, and within a minute, a bomb falls from the Sabre jets, one of the jets. It was air bombardment. And the bomb exploded just about 100 yards away from us.
My goodness.
So I have seen those kind of situations.
You were what age?
11 years old. And I have seen that kind of, still the war had erupted. We stayed back. The whole family stayed back. I remember helping my senior students or my seniors in the school and college, and going up to the border and even serving the food for the army people to support them.
Yes.
Even during war.
Yes.
So we were never scared of these things in life. And that made me much more stronger, I think. That kind of a situation when I would see the ambulance trains coming with the injured people, somebody is injured in the head or somebody is injured in the foot. So I have seen those, and which made me much more stronger about life.
You feel that by the time these events happen, your sort of stress muscle is although over a very, very long period of time, it stayed with you, right? The kind of the memory of those things stayed with you and allowed you to make the decisions that you made in those moments.
I have always realized one thing in life, that look, whatever you do, if you cannot help others, there's no point in being there in life. If you, on the road, you do not help somebody who's injured and move away, then what are you there for? Because you can be in the same position one day and nobody else will help you.
Yeah.
And that's what people must learn. Everything comes back to you in this life. Hell or heaven is here. It's not anywhere else. So do your deeds best way, whatever you can do for others. And I think there is some superpower above us to see that.
Throughout what follows in the story, you've explained what happened with the wedding party. We now got this situation unfolding on the lobby area and the ground floor of the hotel. Your mind immediately moves to the floors above. You're getting guests to safety. But as I understand it, Hemant, you were never more than, when you're in your office, when you're in the safety of your office, you were no more than 14 steps, as I understand it, from safety. You and your staff could have run, and you would most likely have escaped. And I'm not sure that too many people would have blamed you for it. There were terrorists, running through the hotel, firing off AK-47s, but you didn't do that. Explain to me, or explain to us, if you can, why you made the decision you made. You knew that you could get out. It was right there. The exit was just down the corridor.
It's not even a few seconds. I could have got out. My team would have got out. It was just few seconds away. But Our main job or priority was the guest lives. I mean, somebody has come to your house to dine. You have to make sure that they go back home safely. Somebody is waiting for them at home too. They come to your house. It's our house where they've come, and their safety is our priority. That's the way I looked at the things, and we all of us look at the things in Taj. That's the culture we always had. Whatever situations, I mean, this kind of a situation had not come earlier, but whatever situations had come, we went beyond to make sure that the guests are safe. Their safety was our priority. Their living being was our priority. And that's what we did. In fact, I asked some of my staff members, my colleagues, that whosoever wants to leave can leave.
I
But
want to
most of them,
ask you about that. There's a scene in the film, which was released a couple of years ago, when you gather your kitchen staff and you give them the option to leave. You give a speech and you say there is no shame in leaving. But of course, the vast majority decided to stay with you. Was that an accurate? Was that an accurate kind of scene in that sense?
I can tell you, even without asking, they never went.
Without asking.
I asked one of the boys who was with me, and he was on dialysis. He used to come once a week. He used to have dialysis, and he was on duty. And I asked him, I said, Mr. Aziz, you can leave because you've got a dialysis and everything. You just came back yesterday. And he says, no, sir, we'll go together.
And your secretary, your PA,
my secretary
stayed with you.
She stayed back. In fact, she helped the injured lady who came to my office. One lady who was injured with a bullet injury and was bleeding. She came went with her to the laundry, got her a new pajama, did her bandaging and everything, and made sure that she was safe.
Another of our guests on the podcast was a British politician and a former soldier. His name is Johnny Mercer, and he served in Afghanistan and a number of other places. He said that courage is infectious. That through leadership you can inspire, encourage others, but it's a physical thing. If people see it, they can kind of attach to it just as much as they can attach to fear. Did you see that in those around you, in terms of your staff, in those that decided to, which is the vast majority, decided to stay with you?
In fact, these were the youngsters as well as the senior team members. I mean, they took up their role in such a beautiful way. Whichever of my sous chef or the managers were in each restaurant, they were looking after their guests so well. And when we were going from one restaurant to another from the back areas, I could see them serving the guests in the right way, as if nothing has happened. It is the normal way. They were picking up the right glass for the right wine, and the right beer had to be served in the right way and everything. And that is the way normal things were. I mean, I was amazed at some of the things what people were doing, and they went beyond their duty. They were so courageous. They thought, somebody's come to attack their house. Let's protect everybody. Nobody left. I don't even remember any person at that time leaving us.
Because had
to push the people.
Because in the film there is, as I say, that scene where people are given a choice and one or two leave. As far as you remember, nobody did. I
didn't see anybody leaving. In fact,
just astonishing, and perhaps proof that courage is in.
I can tell you an incident that in the night I went to the chambers and I saw the people. Some young people and they have not eaten anything from 9 o'clock. And it's been about 5 hours under stress. And every time I went inside, they asked, when are the security forces coming in? Every time I had to say, yes, they are on their way. But then I decided to come back and I said, let's make some sandwiches for them and send them some cookies and some other stuff and make some tea, coffee. And I came up to make the sandwiches, and suddenly I see five of the young chefs who had just joined about 6 months to 1 year back. They came running and they were in the basement in the staff cafeteria, and they came running up and they said, "Sir, why are you doing it? We will do it. No? This is our job. We will do it." And I feel bad, so bad, that today I lost two out of those when they came
were
to attack.
two of those younger.
Two of those
young
young kids died. And
Hemant, do you mind if we try, just say for people listening, to try and explain because it was such a confused and difficult situation. As I understand it, having made that decision in terms of the two restaurants, getting people under the table, lights off, then managing to get some of those people out, along with the wedding party, as you've explained. So you've now made the decision, which was a huge strategic decision actually that you took, that you will now move those guests into the Chambers Club, which was the private members club in the hotel. And you did that because it is effectively kind of segregated from the main hotel and quite a difficult place to access. And so in your mind's eye, this has got to be the safest place. Tell us about that decision. That's a decision under the most incredible pressure. You know that people have died and are still very much at risk of dying, but you make the decision that's something that has to be done. And of course, what we should explain as well is that one of the reasons, perhaps the key reason why you're having to do this, is that by now it's clear that there are no special forces, specially trained police officers even, in Mumbai to be able to help you. In fact, the local police have been told to stand back and wait for those specialists, if you like, to arrive from New Delhi, and they're many hours away. Just tell us, Hemant, what was in your mind that led you to make that decision that ultimately saved so many lives, to go to the Chambers?
You see, Chambers is a place which was right behind my office actually, and it's in the new building, it's between the old and the new wing, the tower block and the old building. So I knew that if the terrorists have to come from the old wing into the new wing, either they have to pass through the lobby or they have to go through my office area or the kitchen floor. So we had blocked all the doors of the banquet room. We had locked them. We had blocked all the passages. So it wouldn't have been possible for them to enter from here. And they knew that some of the cops are standing in the lobby, so they won't try to do that. That's why I realized that Chambers was the safest place. So we moved all the people from the Japanese restaurant, as well as the Chinese, as well as the Indian restaurant and the banquet. So we took them to Chambers, to a safer place.
How many people, how many guests?
Should be over 200.
And these are people of all nationalities, all ages. You had
all nationalities, all ages.
Yeah, there are children there.
Yeah. In fact, we didn't touch one of the banquet areas. People were Unilever, the existing chairman and their previous chairman. Every year they have a board meeting. And we're almost 20 of the ex-chairman and the present chairman of Unilever comes every year. So 21 of them were having dinner, and I had just met them about 15 minutes before the attack. And we left them there. And the girl who was looking after them, I mean, I would say that she was so brave and was constantly in touch with us. And I told her, stay back, just lock the door from inside. There's no need to panic.
Which of the restaurants are they in?
The restaurant which we cleared off were Wasabi, Golden Dragon, and Masala Craft. All these three restaurants we just cleared. And some of the banqueting, there was one wedding that night. And about 100 people were already in. And we cleared that too.
Okay, so you move this group into the chambers, as I say, all nationalities, all
Yeah.
ages, all of them terrified, and I assume behaving and reacting in very different ways. It must have been a terribly kind of
You see, yes, lot of
stressful to put it mildly. Environment. In those early moments when you've brought all those people into the chambers, they've followed your lead, they've taken your advice, they've gone to the chambers. Just tell me what the atmosphere was like there, Hemant.
you see yes, there was a panic in some of the places. I was getting calls from some people who were overseas and their families were there dining with us, and they said, "Please take care of them, and how is the situation? Please take them out as soon as possible." I said, "Don't worry about that. They'll be taken care." And every time I went into the chambers, somebody or the other asked, "When are the security people coming from Delhi?" And every time I had said, "They've already boarded. They should be on the way. They should be on the way." And the only decision I thought I should take at that time was in the midnight was that I told the operator to switch off the television so that it should not create more panic to the
Yes,
people when they see a lot of live situations.
yes, because the whole thing is being played out on TV, right?
Yes, and
Including
I
your,
always
including, I assume, your family at home.
yes. In fact, they were watching it live, and I don't know if you know about it. That at 3:45 or so in the morning, two of the channels had declared me dead,
Two
and
cha-
they
two
said
two
he has
news
been
channels
shot.
had two news channels had declared
Yes,
you dead.
yes,
Goodness.
and there
Were
was,
you,
of
you
course,
were
a
you
panic.
able
But
to?
I had told them not to call me because the slightest disturbance or the noise would have attracted the attention of these terrorists.
So
So
you
no calls
were
I took.
okay. So those that were in the chambers were staying as quiet as possible.
Yes,
You were doing your best to look after them to the point of making sandwiches for them. You were going in and out of chambers yourself from your office and trying
yeah,
to keep people calm, trying to assure them that special forces were on their way.
yeah.
But what did you actually believe the situation to be, Hemant? I mean, what were you? Did you have any kind of sense at all of what was happening outside of the doors, beyond what you had been able to see yourself on the TV? When you got the TV turned off, by the way, for the guests in chambers, did that mean that you couldn't watch the TV anymore, or did you still have a feed in your office?
You see, I told them to switch off in certain areas,
Yeah,
that we could do it in certain areas. But my guys were watching everything on their computers, everything on their phones,
of course.
and my senior chefs were in touch with all the security guys and everything. And when I went down to the lobby at about say 2:45 or 2:50 in the morning, and I saw the general manager standing in the lobby, and I was asking him. I said, "You're not picking up the phone. At least tell me now what we should do. Shall we start the evacuation?" And he turned around and he says, "What are you doing, sir? Please go back. They can watch you." I said, "They can watch me." He said, "They are in the CCTV room."
They're taking
And
they're taking control of the CCTV room, and they knew
yes,
and they knew.
and the moment I heard that, and CCTV room is right above my office, and I rushed back very quietly. I came back, and there's a staircase which comes from CCTV room near to CCTV room right down to next to my office. So we took the help of all the boys. We put all the chairs, tables, some fridges on the staircase so that they can't come down from there to block that area. And that was the time when in about 15 minutes, I that took a decision along with I asked the guys, my senior team member, I said, let's start the evacuation. It's high time because they are roaming around freely from sixth floor to the second floor down. And
Just
let's do
before,
it.
yes, just before we get to the evacuation, um, you know, because you've taken us through many hours of crisis. You know, this is now the early hours of the morning. It started, as I say, at about 9:30. This is a tremendous period of time to be trapped in this situation.
And
As we've already said, a large number of guests, some of them injured, I assume, by the way. Were some of the guests in the chambers injured? They come from areas where they'd been under fire or not?
yeah, they could hear the gunshot, they could hear the fire
Yeah,
because from the chambers you can see the old building still, and you can hear the gunfires, you can hear the grenade blasts, and that you could hear. And still, some of them were on the mobiles, they were still watching on the mobile,
of course.
and they were getting all the news. And but that didn't deter us from anything. And I said, no, we'll start the evacuation. And
But just before then, I'm just fascinated, really, Hemant, to understand how you stay calm when you are trapped in a situation like that, which is surreal. Obviously, is one word. Horrific is another. Both of them equally appropriate, I think. Where you can, as you say, hear the gunshots. You can hear grenades being thrown around the building. As I understand it, the terrorists also, perhaps a little bit later, set fire to parts of the building. Their plan was to try and burn the hotel down, wasn't it? I think.
yep.
Which again brings its own terrors. Just how did you stay calm?
I really don't know from where that kind of energy or the strength comes in under such situations. But I realized that as a leader, if I panic, the whole team will panic. And if they leave, these 200 people, 200 odd people are gone. They will be at the mercy of terrorists only. Because the moment they will come and they will shoot everybody. So 200 odd people's lives were in the hands of all of us. And if we panic, everybody else will. So I thought being a leader, I don't even know how it came, but it just came. Some kind of energy and decision making, right decision at the right time was taken. And it helped in saving lives.
There are still, of course, a fair number of your staff outside of the chambers in various parts of the hotel. All manner of horror stories are unfolding around the hotel. Hostages are being taken. Chef Raghu Diora, who I'm sure you knew well, was caught by the terrorists and told to lay down between two tourists, a father and a son, who were then executed next to him. He was shot as well, I understand, but remarkably and thankfully survived. How aware were you that these? Were you aware of these things happening around the hotel whilst you are trying to manage the situation that's right in front of you?
You see, most of these chefs were outside my office, and when I was near the chambers, when these people entered the kitchens, and one of my senior most chefs was just coming out to tell me, so the terrorists have already come down to the level 1, and he opens the door, and right in front of him, the terrorist is standing and shooting him point blank. And I'm on the other side at an L angle, and I can hear the gunshots. And we had already started the evacuation with the wall being made by our staff, some of the managers, some of the chefs. And from behind they were firing, and some of the guys were shot. And then there was a little panic that everybody started rushing towards the chambers.
Hmm.
So at that point also, me and my colleagues' job was to ensure that all these people are taken back to chambers safely. So whomsoever we pushed them back into the chambers, and we told them to lock the door and switch off the lights and stay calm till they move away. But Chef Raghu Deora he tried to hide himself in the kitchen of chambers along with some other guests.
Hmm.
And these two terrorists came over there and started shooting them. And then they fired at him, first in the leg and then in the stomach. And at that moment also, he sent a message. He says, saying, "Sir, I'm shot. Please help."
He's sending you a message on his phone.
Yes. And
he's sending you a text message.
Text message. And I said, "Where are you?" He says, "I'm in the chambers kitchen." And I told my security guy, I said, "Where are you?" He said, he's another brave boy, Sunil. And he says, "Sir, I'm actually towards your office, but on the other end." I said, "Sunil, Chef Raghu is injured. Can you help?" He says, "Sir, the terrorist is standing right over there. And if I reach over there, he will shoot at everybody. Can he crawl towards your office?" And the moment the terrorist moved out of the chambers, thinking that Chef Raghu is dead, he crawled towards my office where our security head, Sunil, he lifted him up and took him out, and he got saved.
These astonishing stories. Because these of course these are people that you know well. These are people who work with you and for you, who you had a sort of deep relationship with, in the way that you explained right at the start of this conversation, that the relationship between the staff at the hotel was.
These people have worked with me at that time, and they had worked with me for 15 years.
Yeah. So, Hemant, we're now at the point where the decision is made to evacuate. As you said earlier, partly because you now understood, the terrorists to have control of the CCTV, but also, as I understand it, the media had announced or had released the fact of such a large number of guests being in the chambers. And of course, this is TV that the terrorists themselves are watching. Certainly the people that are working with them outside of the hotel are watching. And so you make quite correctly the calculation, we don't have very long here, that they'll get to us eventually. So tell me about that decision, please. What you remember now of because it was, a pivotal decision, how you were able to make it, how you're able to calculate all that in the midst of everything that you've just described.
See, we didn't know that because when I started the evacuation process, we didn't realize, we thought it will be over in about 15, 20 minutes. And we'll be able to take out all the 200 people as our people had organized the buses just about a few hundred yards away. So the buses were parked to take them to the other hotels. But suddenly when we heard the gunshots, then we realized something has gone wrong somewhere. It's only the next day or after a few hours we came to know that it is due to the media leakage of the news that one of the channels lady said,
yes,
look, evacuation has already started. I just spoke to a member of parliament in chambers and he said evacuation has already started. That's when their handlers told them, find out where is Chambers. And they came, they cut open the doors, they fired at the doors, they fired at everybody indiscriminately and to look for Chambers. They didn't know where Chambers was.
Yes.
So that's how it happened. And it was very shocking for us that about 1,800 people have already moved out in the evacuation and rest get trapped.
So you've made the decision. You'd already made the decision that the evacuation must start. You now have the horrible realization that the terrorists are much closer than you anticipated. And you make a decision again with your staff that what needs to be done is that effectively you're going to form a kind of barrier between the terrorists and your guests, a human barrier that will hopefully allow those remaining guests to escape down the stairwell and out onto the street. That was a kind of organized decision, Hemant. This is what we need to do, guys, is that we need to protect our guests in this way to ensure that they are able to get to safety. Can I ask you, when you explain that to the staff, this is what we're going to do, total agreement, total understanding of what needs to be done and total agreement, and you get on with it. Is that right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
When you look back, and there is some distance now, but when you look back on those moments, I think the director of the film, I think, said this, that the not just that there was so much selflessness, it's that it was so instinctive. It was so it happened so almost naturally. When you look back at it now from this distance, Hemant, I mean, obviously you must feel an incredible sense of pride about the way that your people behaved. But have you ever sort of sat and reflected and thought, how is it that everyone, just did that?
I think it's a trust. It's a trust. It's a bonding. It's the faith in each other, which makes it so different. They will do anything. They will do anything to protect the place. And the unity of command was there. And they won't go against the decisions.
Tell me about...
Whatever we will do is for the place. And whatever we'll do is the best for the place.
Tell me about some of your people, Hemant. We mentioned Chef Raghu a moment ago. Give us another couple of examples of the people that were around you in and amongst that those moments.
Chef Nitin was the one. In fact, he was the one who gave me the news first that there's a shooting, and he was standing right outside my office when the terrorists entered, and he got a shot in the arm, and a bullet came, AK-47 bullet, and his hand is still not fully cured. It's been 12 years. And he ran with a bullet injury outside to Colaba police station for the help. He ran outside.
Goodness.
That is a kind of a person. There was another person who was injured, and yet he was walking so coolly. And by the time he realized that there's a bullet injury on him, and Chef Sajesh Nair was his name. Chef Vanja was a very unlucky one who got the first bullet when the terrorists entered. Then there were 6 other, Chef Boris Rego, Chef Rego's son, and Chef Hemant Oberoi, who was there from Golden Dragon, young boy who was getting married, and he pleaded them that I'm going to get married in 6 months' time. Why are you killing innocent people? And he says, okay. So they put a gun at it, pointed here, and they shot him point blank. And he told us the story even in the hospital before he died. He died after about 8-9 days in the hospital. He was struggling with life.
Yeah.
And then we had Kaizad Kamdin, was another good boy, 6 feet 2 tall. And he was injured so badly. He crawled. And one boy had come back. He had gone out to escort the guests, and he came back to get this fellow. And then he saw the terrorist in front of him who shot both of them.
I think what's, one of the most astonishing elements of this as we listen to those stories, Hemant, is that, these things were happening through the night. And yet you and your team were able to display this incredible resilience just to be able to kind of continue to operate in the way that you were, but also just the selflessness. It's quite breathtaking. Can we move to the final stage, if you like? You've made the decision that you're going to evacuate. The team are agreed that the way to do this is to form this kind of human shield. But there were, that was not a straightforward process at all. It was very complicated and I think very complex. Can you try and talk us through the evacuation itself? Because as I understand it, it almost turned into a chase. That there were periods of that evacuation when you knew that right behind you, that the terrorists were chasing. Is that right?
Yes. In fact, after putting everybody back into the chambers, they started running after us, and it's the 3 floors down in the staircase. They were running behind us. And suddenly there's a laundry area in the basement. And in fact, one of my colleagues, we were about 17, 18 staff members. And I said, let's go into the laundry, and there's a room, I think, which is the safest place. Because otherwise all the 17 people can be shot. So
this is a mixture of your staff and guests. This is one of those groups of 10 that you were trying to get out. Yeah.
Yeah. So young boys from the housekeeping, young boys from the food and beverage, some of my chefs, we were about 17, 18 of them. And I can hear the voices of terrorists because they were speaking in a language which I knew. And then after about 10 minutes, since they lost us, so they went away. And saying that these people have fled away, I think. So let's go. But still, to safeguard the lives of these people, the young boys who were on the verge of crying, some of them, sir, can I go home? I'll die. I'm only child. I said, if you make more noise, all of us will die. So please be quiet. And then in between, we are getting the news from the other boys being shot also. And then we were waiting for the security people to come. And,
so that was the last part of the evacuation.
Yes.
You stayed there until you were you knew you were safe.
Yeah.
And what was happening in terms of the security forces by this stage? You knew that there were police in the building. You knew that there's some police in the lobby. So whilst the terrorists are chasing you, they themselves are being kind of cornered in a certain part of the building, and the kind of end game of it, if you like, is beginning to get underway.
Yes, some of the operations by that time the security, some of the people had already come, the police had come. So in the chambers by itself, some action had already started between the police and the security forces and the terrorists. And when one of the terrorists, I think, was injured in that, then they started running for their lives. That is the time when police got an upper hand. So the terrorists could not harm anybody inside the chambers.
Mm.
That was the best part of it. Inside the chambers, they could not enter.
Yes.
They were right outside in the kitchen area and everything, but inside they could not enter. And that's how a lot of lives were saved.
Hemant, you lost 7 members of your team. 31 people died in the hotel. 11 were staff, 7 of whom, as I say, were members of your team. Tell me a little bit about the people that you lost.
Each one of them, Shabanja, who was literally my second in command. We would walk down sometimes together in the night after the working hours, and I would make him walk actually. And he will say, "No, sir, we'll go in your car." And I said, "No, Panja, you must walk. Older, you don't walk too much." So, but being a noble soul, he was one of the purest souls.
Mm.
God-fearing, who will go to church, make sure that twice a week he'll go to the church.
Yeah.
And very God-fearing, pure at heart, totally dedicated staff.
He was effectively he was one of your most senior members of staff.
Yes, he was my number 2.
Yeah.
He was my deputy.
So a very talented man as well.
Oh yes, he was. And these young boys who died, whether Kaiser Kandin or Zahin Martin and Rego, these were the young newcomers who were coming up so well. I mean, I could see the future in them. They were already 3 years, 4 years into the industry.
Yes.
And that's how the things were unfolding. And they were so unlucky, and probably we were unlucky to lose them too.
Well, I'm so sorry, and I'm sure I speak for everyone who's listening to this. Let me ask you, Hemant, about how the events from your perspective and the perspective of those guests whose lives you'd saved together with your staff. Just tell me about those last moments. How you got out. What those last kind of moments, how they came to pass, and how it felt, I suppose, to be finally outside of this this terrible scene.
You see, it's at about 8 o'clock in the morning when the National Security Guards came, and they got in touch with us, all of us, and they said, "We are coming to clear your path so that you don't have to worry about." And they came down to the laundry area, and they escorted us out, and I was like walking the same way I used to walk, but then suddenly one of the cops said, "Sir, you are in the shooting range of these people, the terrorists from top. Please go from the main road, not from this road."
So you were about to walk out onto the street.
Yes. And then we had to take another street down the line, and our uniforms. That was the only time probably I've gone back to the house in uniform, and uniform with stains of blood, sweat, everything, dirt, and but that's what it was. And we reached home, and when we reached home, about the entire village. We have a fisherman village right next to our house, and they were sitting at our house. And the moment I rang the bell and they opened the door, and my sous chef was also with me. And they were, they didn't know how to express themselves as if they have seen a ghost, because the channels had declared us dead.
They'd gathered at your house with your family, believing
Yeah.
that you'd died.
Yeah. And they were trying to console my wife. And that's how it was.
And you walk
And then I walk in.
into the house, still in your still in your as you describe, a bloodied uniform with your sous chef at your side.
Yeah.
Just tell us about that moment, please. Your family's reaction, your wife's reaction.
Yeah. So she was like, she actually burst out into the tears and didn't even expect, how it will be, the reaction and everything. And the whole jing bang of the villagers and everybody was like, they crowded around and they hugged. And but to our, we were happy to see them, and but still my mind was working in a very different way. My mind was working that my mobile is not working. Let's switch on this thing. We just had a bath. In the meantime, started getting in touch with the people who are injured. We were trying to count the number of people, where they are, whether they were still trapped, what were the guests like, has everybody left the chambers or not.
How aware were you at this stage, Hemant, that you'd lost? You knew, obviously, because you'd seen it happen, that you'd lost some members of your staff. But did you know how many at this stage?
And I didn't know the exact count. But then when we started getting all the information and we went to the hospital and the morgues, that's the time we got all the information that all the injured have come to this hospital and all the dead have come to this hospital. And we were looking at some of the guests also who were injured. So we went and looked at them also. And then we started taking count, calling up each and every staff member at their houses and everything, whether they were safe, reached safely. And taking account of even the guests whom I knew well, whether they have reached back safely.
So, having gone through that, that night, having finally managed to get out, along with those guests that you protected, you go home and you painted that picture for us. You then decide that actually what you need to do is go to the hospitals. You need to go to the morgues to see who's lived and who's died. And that you are then going to start contacting guests. You're going to start contacting families. You're going to totally re-immerse yourself in every bit of the detail of this. That's astonishing, Hemant, that you would make that decision to immediately re-immerse yourself in it all.
Yes, I was out by between 8 and 9:15. We just had a cup of tea and we were out by 9:30 in the hospitals and everywhere.
And of course, that is indicative of what, or gives a clue as to what happens next. Because, as you say, the siege continues for some time. Eventually comes to an end. The terrorists are cornered and killed. And you make a decision, together with the management of the hotel, but you make a decision that we must start to rebuild immediately, to the point, as you touched on much earlier in our conversation, that you set yourself the target of being open for Christmas Eve. Tell us about that and why that was such an important decision for you.
You see, we did not want, there was so much of anger and anguish that we did not want the terrorists to feel that they can win us over and they will overrule uh, everything, whatever we have done, and we will be cowed down and we will be bogged down for a long time to come. No, we were not. It was a kind of vengeance kind of a thing, that we must open as fast as we can to give a befitting reply to these guys. And that's how I think our team worked. Day and night they worked in the clearance, whosoever had to do everything. Our vendors from Europe who were almost getting close for their Christmas holidays, they were so supportive. The vendors within India were so supportive that without even a letter of credit, they had sent us the goods and they said, "Don't worry about the money. Money will follow later. You just whatever cutlery, crockery, glassware we have, we will definitely supply you to come back on your feet." And that was so amazing. And the staff coming back. And yes, some of the staff literally was scared, and we had to literally do some counseling kind of a thing for them.
Yes, yes.
And
can I ask, did you have any counseling at any point?
No.
Conscious decision not to, or what's your view of its value?
It's not that it didn't affect me. It did affect me in the nights. Some nights I couldn't sleep, but I thought we'll get over it.
But how, I suppose, is the question I'd like to ask. How I'm sure a part of you hasn't, but how have you got over it, Hemant? What is it that
we became so busy in redoing the things. It wasn't an easy task. 9 restaurants to reoperate. 2 of them totally gutted, burned down. The damage done in certain other restaurants. And you have to rebuild, relocate the restaurants and to be open in less than, in just about 3 weeks' time. And that was kind of a energy which I think my staff showed a lot of resilience and everything. And they would come down early in the morning. We will have sessions in the kitchen. We got back our kitchens cleaned. But I made sure that, first of all, when we brought the staff, there were no bullet marks or anything left in the kitchens.
Right.
All the windows, glasses, everything was cleaned up, mess was cleaned up. There were no blood stains. So that, they don't even get affected by these things.
Yes. There were no triggers, so, kind of in the mind. Yeah.
There were no traces left. So we did that. So they couldn't see anything. So they thought everything was back to normal. And, we didn't let them go into the certain areas where it was badly affected or things were still smoldering.
So when I ask you the question, how did you manage your... Because it's not just trauma, it's deep grief, as you've described. People that you knew and worked with for many years are no longer alive. When I ask you how you managed your grief and how did you start your recovery, you go immediately to work. It was work that was the answer for you.
Yes. The moment we reopened, I think the flashbacks came very strongly because they were connected with each and every restaurant somewhere or the other. And sometimes it will come out of this, tell Boris to do the needful. And then you'll realize that Boris is no more.
Yes.
And those are the kind of moments which you still recall sometimes. But rebuilding was a challenge, and hats off to our team, our management, Mr. Tata, Mr. Krishna Kumar, who was our managing director, and the team members and our general manager, security, everybody, engineering team, who worked so hard to get the restaurant back. Yeah. Our vendors, our carpentry people, our housekeeping who brought some furniture from all the rooms which were burned down. that because I needed about 50 chairs to open a restaurant in a banquet room. So they brought all the chairs which were not damaged in the rooms. And we could get hold of 50 chairs and got them polished and redid the upholstery.
Incredible
The restaurant
feat.
was.
Yeah. You mentioned a moment ago, Hemant, that the events, of course, affected you. Have they changed you at all?
To some extent, yes. It changes you. You start feeling that one should always be more helpful. You never know when it comes to you. But I became more believer of destiny, very strong believer of destiny.
Were you already?
Yes. And very strong belief. It came again that if it's not written in your destiny, nothing can happen. And whatever is yours, nobody else can take it.
And that thought was with you when you were in the midst of it? When you were in the middle of what happened? You were saying that to yourself?
I didn't have the time to think about any of those things at that time.
No.
I didn't have. Our only motto was to save the guests. There was nothing else working in my mind.
Yes. What did you think of the film? There was some controversy that such a kind of horrific event should be dramatized. But I think you saw it as a positive, didn't you?
I think Anthony has done a good job. You see, 65% of the movie, he's brought out the facts. And 35%, yes, definitely he had to make a movie.
Yeah.
And
but he's been quite respectful of the identities of people that were involved. Yes. He created some fictionalized characters, merged some stories. You of course,
due credit to everybody, to the families,
yes,
to the management, to everybody.
But you think your view is that it's important that story should be told in the way that he chose to tell it.
You see, what happens is people's memories are very short-lived. They're very, very short-lived.
Yes.
They forget. The people who saw the movie after so many years, some of the kids didn't even know what has happened. What is this Hotel Mumbai? What was the terrorist attack about? That's how they talk. And it's only the people who are from that generation, they remembered it, or those who have been through this, or those whose families have been through this. They will remember it more in a way, rather than these youngsters who are living for today, not for tomorrow.
Yes. It's that balance between recovery and memorial, isn't it? That can be so difficult.
Yes.
You built a physical memorial to the staff that you lost, that, as I understood it, still sits on the wall outside of what was your office. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. Just on this 26/11, my staff who's still working there, they sent me the picture of that.
How do you mark the anniversary? How do you?
Last year, I had most of the people who were involved in that or who suffered. They came to my restaurant.
Yes.
So we had a lunch together.
Not possible this year, of course.
This year, due to Corona, it was not possible.
Yeah.
So hopefully when the things go well next year, we'll redo it.
You left the Taj Group in, I think, 2016. Is that correct?
Yes.
To establish your own restaurants.
Yes.
Leaving must have been in some ways very hard, with so much history, so much of your history entwined with the Taj, and of course so much emotion. How big a decision was that for you, and how difficult was it?
You see, actually, I retired in 2015, and 1 year I was advisor to them. And I thought being an advisor, I'm not doing justice to my role,
Mm.
which was always a very active role on the shop floor. You're involved, you're meeting the guests, you're meeting everybody, you're meeting the staff, you're creating something new. Here you're sitting in an office 9 to 6 and just giving a piece of advice here and there. And I thought that role was not what I wanted in life. And
You went back to work.
so I thought, and the opportunities came. First, it was Singapore, and then followed by US, and followed by Abu Dhabi, and then Mumbai.
Yes.
And that's how the things unfolded.
Fantastic. Well, congratulations. And as I say, I hope that the impact of the pandemic, that you're able now to look to a new year and start making progress again. Hemant, I'd like to ask you, if I may, for 3 crisis cures. These are 3 things that we ask for at the end of every podcast, that you have lent on, relied on, do rely on, perhaps still, in those difficult and tough days. What comes to mind when I ask you for yours?
It's the intuition and the gut feelings first. It's always my intuition and gut feelings have never failed me, more or less. If I say this, I shouldn't do it, so I don't do it. And because if I do it, it has one way or the other gone wrong for me, and it's the gut feeling. I listen to my inner voice, and that's the way. And secondly, I think one should be a team leader in a different way. You should be like a pyramid in life. Sometimes the top is down and sometimes the bottom is up. So that pyramid, which can take the load of others in life, I think they are very successful in life.
And your third crisis cure?
Help others as much as you can. Because you never know when you will need it.
Hemant, I just want to end, obviously, by saying thank you. You've given us the most incredible insight to a situation that, as you tell it 12 years on, is still so, it's clearly still so visceral for you, but is still so hard to grasp in so many ways. There are several things I think that shine out from our conversation. Obviously, your innate bravery and selflessness, but also this idea that leadership, which is a word that gets used an awful lot these days in all sorts of contexts, but the real leadership is about trusting your gut instinct, as you've just said, and relying on your values. And there is clearly a very straight line from your history through your career at the Taj, obviously for many years, your relationship with those guests, that when such horror came, you didn't hesitate but to protect. That was the instinct. That was the obvious, it seems to you, perhaps not to people listening to this podcast, but to you, the obvious and only course of action. And I think that there are lessons in and amongst that, buried away in that story, some very obvious, that we can all benefit from. I just want to say thank you for talking to us today, for joining us on the podcast. It's an absolute privilege to have had this conversation with you, Hemant, and I thank you for it.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Greg. And Looking forward to seeing you one day.
I look forward to that too. Thank you, Hemant.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to Crisis What Crisis. Feel free to send us your feedback. You'll find our contact details and our show notes giving you the key insights from our guests at crisiswhatcrisis.com. There are also links to our newsletter, Facebook page and Instagram. There are more useful conversations on the way soon, and if you enjoyed this podcast, please do give us a rating and a review. Thanks again.